So can you see?
Yep.
Okay, so what dawned in the discussions we also had offline was that the one thing that really comes with the proposals from Kiriti and Stewart and us was also the element of conditional execution of certain actions as indicated by the FAI. And in the case, and please correct me if I'm interpreting something wrong here, but in the case of Kiriti, we have up to 8 bits in the TTL field that are assigned to whether or not a particular fixed feature would be executed. Let's say independent or not, whether there is associated data below bottom of stack with it. And in the case of Stuart's draft, it is a single pointer that is pointing to the block of ancillary data, which would then indicate, what action it is. So that's my kind of approach to compare and unify both of these approaches from what they're giving to the ability to conditionally execute actions. So Kiriti's proposal, of course, is a lot more compact by allowing up to 8 of these actions to be executed. But then on the other hand, of course, you'd start to be worried of saying, well, will 8 actions be, ever enough for what we want to do, let's say, in a year from now, even if it does look good now. And so that's where I was coming from. And so when it now comes to how can we further improve, I think the main issue that we have is I think we don't have good team-wide agreed rules for what and what is not acceptable to be parsed, going back to what Kiriti was just saying as well, in terms of, well, please come back and tell us if these things can be parsed or not. So in that respect, what I'm going to propose is yet another, big question mark to, can we either figure out more generally what we agree to see as parsable, and or can we have vendors chime in on these things and we do it ad hoc, like I think we've done in the past. So with that saying, my idea for best of both worlds was to simply generalize the idea from Kiriti by saying, well, let's just have 8 bits that if they're on, each of them indicate that a particular action is conditionally executed by this hop or hops that are acting on the FAI, and otherwise not. And then we actually put the idea which action is associated with it. We put that in the bottom of stack encoding itself. And so in this case, simple encoding would be, let's say we have these 3 ID bits in a particular bottom of stack action field. So that is indicating, if that is 3, it indicates this is the block for bit number 3 in the TTL field, so to speak. Then the actual identifier of the action that would go in the IANA registry, what we had like fragmentation or whatever else the actions are we're interested in, and then the length of the block followed by 0 or more bytes of actual data that we need. So in the minimum case with this type of encoding, we would need for each and now extensible action 16 bits to encode below the bottom of stack what the actual action is, so we're not stuck with 8. And as soon as we're going into actual data that an action has, well, would be, I think, wasting a little bit more of 12 bits to have this mapping of a single ID bit to an action identifier in the bottom of stack. Yep, so that was it.
Okay, and like I said, I need to think about this some more. But I will say that if you go back to 2 slides up, slide number 2, the H bit here was to indicate that the next 31 bits are more actions. So the extensibility was supposed to be through that H bit. But having said that, I think, as you said, we don't know what's efficient to do. So I want to go sort of between a TTL kind of structure, which is very general purpose, which is typically what I expect to have happen after the end of stack, because you have more space to play with, and you're not constrained with these funky, I need to keep the S bit honest, and so on. But having said that, the thing that, for example, if you look at ELI, right, it was an idea that, I'm going to have one special purpose label with one purpose, which is to give you an entropy and keep that near the top of stack so that, without too much processing, you can do a good load balancing on this without going, to an actual IP header and looking for the 5 tuple there where you would normally do load balancing. So, and then if you look at things like no further pass reroute and stuff, again, you want to keep these as much as possible near the top of stack so you can take forwarding actions, or inactions, in the case of no further pass reroute, quickly, and you know what to do. I think the slice selector would fall under that as well, if people believe that that's a good thing to do, because the slice selector tells you how to treat the packet, what's the per hop behavior for this packet. So what I'm trying to get to, and this was sort of a discussion point between me and Hao-Yu as well, that there's this combination of let's hard code a few things that we think are interesting, important for packet. That's why this is also called forwarding actions. So it's important for forwarding actions and keep them near the top of stack. And then if you want to get fancier and want to do more things, then you have a TLV structure. And then you put the TLV structure at the bottom. So I think what you're doing is finding yet another sort of place in between. And I'm all for making this extensible. But if you think about where we used to be, which is one SPL has one action, it's very fixed, and it just does one thing. And we're going to from that to one SPL has 5 or 6 actions. And yes, it may not be extensible, but we still do have a few SPLs left, and we always have the extended SPL. So the idea for me is, let's take certain things that are important, that really affect forwarding, and let's make them easy to do and nearby, as in like near the top of stack. And then let's take other things and where you like IOM, where you have maybe a much more complex structure, and put them at the end of stack and have a TLV structure for that. That's kind of the philosophy I come from, but that I'm just trying to explain that.
Yeah, that's good.
And yeah.
I mean, my philosophy here was kind of similar, right? So I was trying to challenge to see what is the lowest common denominator on parsing that we would feel acceptable for any of these advanced actions that we have, because then we don't need to do special cases, which I think is what you're implying for the one most important ones, right? So if this is, for example, a structure that is feasible for the parsers of the, relevant forwarding engines, right? Obviously, we can ignore forwarding engines that wouldn't be able to do the advanced actions anyhow, right? So from that perspective, I think we're after the same thing. We're just trying to put the bar at different heights, and I'm trying to create a fairer bar, and you're trying to differentiate between, maybe the important and the less important.
Right, and it's not like any one is the right approach. I think it's good that we have different proposals, and I mean, how you started with a proposal that everything should be beyond end of stack, and I don't disagree from the point of view of that is the most general, but that might not be the most efficient. And my thing was, put the things that you really need right away near the top of stack and put the rest of it at the bottom of stack. And I think what you have is something in between. So yeah, I think we need to do a 3-way arm wrestling. We need to get people who actually write forwarding code to weigh in, and then we, move forward. But the idea is, of course, to end up with something that not everyone necessarily, but most people are comfortable with.
Yeah, and by the way, there is one more option that I didn't mention, which is closer to what you said, just coming out of this discussion, which is obviously that instead of indicating, what the ID bit means, it could as well be configured, right? I mean, you're coming from the very extreme, which is it's in the standard, the next logical thing, it's network-wide configured, which, you know, for many specific networks might be feasible for, you know, the 2 or 3 top items. And then for the other bits, you're, for example, using this scheme.
Right. And to your point about the network-wide configured, we actually started the FAI draft there. So we did want everything to be configured via the control plane or the management plane. The problem there is if anyone isn't configured, or you know, how do you deal with things that don't know how to deal with this or haven't been updated correctly? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, everyone should understand that bit number 3 means this, and then if for whatever reason one router didn't know what that bit is, then who knows what happens.
Well, discard and
having
create
it
an OEM
self-contained-
message, right? I mean, that's if you see a bit set which you haven't been configured or which isn't in the bottom of stack here, it's basically an error, right?
Yeah, I agree. But what if you know, in updating everyone, so you told everyone this is what bit 1 means, bit 2, bit 3, and then you updated everyone, at least you thought you updated everyone about bit 3, but there's one guy that was missed for whatever reason. You have someone who thinks he knows what bit 3 is, but they have the old version of it. Anyway, we did talk our way through this, and we decided a self-contained thing is a little bit better, which I think is your third bullet, self-descriptive, self-contained. So, I have to think more about this. You know, we also have to run it by folks who do this for a living.
One question from my side on Torless slide before you stop sharing. So are these actions, do you think they will be wrapped in a header or they standalone TLVs that will sit between the user data and the stack?
I have no preconceived notion of all the actions. The one I'm interested in would have maybe in the order of 32 or more bits of data after it, right? So in that case, the overhead of having this ID to action mapping, of course, becomes much smaller than if it was only, you know, bits where the bottom of stack wastes another 16-bit to define what they are.
Okay, and the presence of this action list is you know, dictated by no need to define a first nibble discussion or even a header for wrapping all this together.
Well, this is independent of it, right? This was just showing how to do the conditional execution and having the information necessary in each of these ancillary data blocks, right? So how to wrap the whole set ancillary data block together that it's found or so. I think that's a different discussion.
Okay, it's a different, yeah, because I have the flag and I know the action is sitting there, but I don't know how to get there. That's my issue is how to get to the action that's set by bit position 0.
You have to sequentially search.
Yeah, I don't know what needs to be done really. Do I have to parse the gash before it, for example?
So if you skip past that, from what I understand from Torless description, you get past the GACH or whatever comes immediately after bottom stack. And when you get to the part where these IDs and actions are, you have to then sequentially go through them to
indeed. And is it like order? Like the order is as per encoded? And are they always invoked on all the nodes? I think that is
the invocation, of course, is indicated by the FAI.
Yes.
Right, so that's the new conditional thing. The sequence of action items that are linked with each other by length, and that would be self-descriptive with the action being in the field itself, as opposed to what we had, you know, in IP where you had the next header field, right? I think these things we already discussed in the past few meetings. Kiriti, I think, and I had that discussion.
Yeah, understood. Okay.
At the end of the day, you have only two possibilities to identify this, right? One thing is either basically by pointing to the position or the other one is by pointing to an identifier and resolving that separately. Right? And I think these are the options here on the table, just like with any other memory structure.
And I'm sorry, right? I've also been working on beer, so just bits are just natural to me. So
without some form like this, you can't have more than one of any type below the bottom of stack. And it's not clear to me that you won't need to do that, particularly around latency, for example, or
So
OEM direction.
So you're saying we could have two bits that are pointing to different instances of the same action?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Good point.
Well, I mean, you know, we need to make a design decision, right? But an invariant of not doing that is that you never can, if you see what I mean.
I wasn't clear on that. So when you're saying that if you have one gal in the label stack, then there is an ACH after the boss.
Yeah.
If you have another gal, you can't have the second.
We're not talking about gals here. We're talking about vectors to actions.
Well, that was, you generalize your statement much more than that. You said you can only have one.
Yeah. I mean, so in Cariti's approach, where you just which I think says somewhere or take the following action now, or it says take the following action with the help of something below the label stack. There is only room for one instance of that action. With the pointer scheme or the bit vector scheme, you can have multiple instances,
Stuart,
which you may want.
Sorry, to amend your statement a little. In the label stack, you can only take one action. But below the label stack, you could take multiples depending on the structure that ends up there. And if you want to take multiple actions within the label stack, you'd have to have multiple FAIs.
And you'd have to have the selector mechanism down there, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So you'd have to have a per segment selector. That's the problem.
Right.
So it all depends on whether we want per segment actions as opposed to essentially unitary actions.
I'm still not clear what you're saying. Let's make the following assumption. We have a packet coming in with a label stack. You find a gal in that stack, and
who says anything about gals? Gals aren't in this piece of thing at the moment in this discussion on the board.
The gals are there. They will be there.
They're not here. This gal is. I mean, maybe I'm looking at we're in different meetings, but I'm looking at a thing that says proposal and a bit vector on the right hand side.
I understand, but what I'm uncertain about is that there can be an interference between the what we have in the gal and what we have here.
So let's say, for example, we have some new action for improved deterministic networking or whatever QS we have, right? And it has a bunch of parameters like, okay, delay or, priority or whatever these parameters are. And across the path, we need to instantiate multiple instances of those ancillary data blocks. So all these ancillary data blocks would have the same action, which is the ID for, cool new QS block. Right, but then each of them has a different bit. Okay, so in this case, we can have up to 8, and on the according forwarding action indicators, we can instantiate to activate one of the 8. Okay, TBD, make an example of that.
I'll give you a different example, an OEM example. Supposing on one hop I want to measure, I don't know, packet loss, but on another hop I want to measure time to arrival. Yeah. Oh, what? Yeah. I really need 2 bits to specify those 2 things, and I need them to be hop specific. And some of these approaches allow us to tailor the actions per hop in a better way than some of the others. The one I gave probably wasn't a very good a good example, but and latency may be a better example. But it's all a question of whether we want to do tailoring on the path to things that ostensibly look the same but have different parameters in them. And I don't know. I mean, all I'm pointing out is that some routes allow us to do this and other routes close that off.
I think we should keep this objective open of
Yes.
the idea of invoking actions at different actions at different nodes.
The
Right.
different instances of the same action as well, I think, is the new thing Stuart brought up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay.
No, I mean, I'm prepared to be told, for someone to point out this is a crazy thing to want to do, and you need to set up a different type of segmentation across the path, etc. All I want to do at this stage is to point out which options we're closing off to make sure that we really want to close them off, and we won't discover 5 minutes after closing the RFC and sending it to for publication that actually we have a need for it, because it might be quite hard to get it back again.
Curtis, can you somehow post this slide somewhere?
Of course. I'll find a way.
I was gonna suggest, yeah, definitely add it to the wiki, and you're taking some action items, I guess, to yourself.
Do you want to do a quick draft on it, Torlis?
No, I think the text around it wouldn't be as helpful as, for example, doing the example slides. I think the slide format is also good right now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Are you done?
Yep, I can stop sharing.
Okay. I think
I've
going back to the agenda for today, I think the next item was Loa.
Well, maybe, but I actually got answers to most of my questions, and the questions I really want to ask, I told that I don't understand, so I don't know what to do really.
We could give you some private tutorial, Loa, and maybe we'll discover it's actually us that don't understand it.
Well, yes. We can do that, but let me just state my overall question. So not in this context of what the bits mean in the phi, but assume that we have one gal and one phi in the same label stack.
Yep.
And the phi points to data after the boss. How do I know which data to action on based on the gal, and what I need to action?
They do conflict.
Yeah.
So there are two schools of thought. One is that you have some metadata before the ACH, and you have some way of knowing that it's different, and that you purge that from the stack before the gal handler gets it. And the other is that well, I don't know what the other one is really.
Well, I don't know either.
To step back, I think the wiki that the data after BOS wiki should bring these things out and see if we can unify the multiple schemes that we have for putting data after end of stack. So we have multiple drafts, and we have RFCs as well. And if we can somehow rationalize all of that and say, this is what the data after the bottom of the stack and before the actual packet starts, this is how that data looks like, how it's interpreted, what you do with it, then I think that would solve these problems.
I mean, one obvious technique is, I'm going to say, is to have an ACH there, so that if the gal gets there, it knows how to handle it, and if the other handler gets there, it knows how to handle it. So you could have all this as an ACH type, but you'd still have to get rid of the information that the classical gal handler would expect to find. So one of the things we're going to have to think about is legacy and how we want to support legacy.
Yep.
Yeah,
Stuart,
that's always.
Stuart, just to clarify, you agree that there is a potential conflict between what we actually have after the boss. We need to have something that disambiguated.
Yeah. Because a gal handler would expect to find an ACH of the sort that it was expecting, and any of this other stuff could be there, and that would confuse it. So there is a legacy conflict.
Okay, fine. So then back to one step back. You said earlier that you can only have one ACH after the boss. Why is that? Why can't you have two? You have two different gals in the stack, and you point to two different.
How do you know which? Well, the gals at the moment don't point to anything.
Yes.
All the gal says is that there's an ACH at the bottom of stack. That's its sole meaning, right? So if what a normal gal handler will do is just go and find the first one.
Sure.
So if you want the second one to point to something different, then the only way that would work at the moment is if you pull the whole front of the stack off, get rid of the first ACH and all of its associated information, and then put it all back together again. Sorry?
That's not what I'm implying. What I'm saying is that if you have a ACH handler, you should probably be able to solve the problem with getting there from two different gals in the stack.
Well, so you two different gals pointing to the same ACH, a single ACH.
That's fine.
That's easy. I think we'd all agree that works.
Yeah.
Two different gals pointing to different ACHs is not anything that we have specified, and it's not clear what the right way to solve it is. It's soluble, of course it's soluble with certain constraints and parameters, but it is not within any of the existing definitions how you would do it.
That's probably true, but what I'm saying is this a problem that we need to look into? Because we will get the question. I want another ACH here. How can I do it?
I have two questions here. One is that when you need to have multiple GACH headers, I thought at least Y1 suggested that today the ACH type is 2 bytes. If we divide that up to 2 bytes, 2 fields, give it the next header and this header semantics, then you can put multiple GACH headers next to each other, right? That's one suggestion I had.
Wait. That's a answer to. That's a proposal how to do it. My question is, do we want to do it?
And I think we need to look at the implications of doing that as well. I don't think there's anything above 256 defined in the set of gals that have been defined so far, but so we might get away with it, but a consequence of that is that we would limit the number of ACHs to 255, and we would have to have a different approach to allocation. At the moment, there's just so many we don't care about it. So we would need to see if anyone has ever wanted anything above 255 for that approach to work.
Right. Okay. And then the other question I have is that when you say you to have multiple gals, what do you mean? I had only assumed that you have one gal and that's always at the bottom of the stack, and then after that is the
no, I think gals can definitely be other than at the bottom of stack. I'm sure we did some work on that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, but the assumption so far has always been that there is only one ACH at the bottom of stack. Remember, GAL just says what follows is an ACH. And if you want to do anything fancy with the ACH, with the channel structure, then we need to think very seriously about that. We can't just sort of sign this off on this call without a proper analysis by people who have done things with GALs and ACHs and are planning to do things with ACHs.
So Stuart, my question that I want to have kind of documented is it possible to have two different GALs in the label stack pointing to two different ACHs after the bottom of stack?
Not as it is. Not as it is currently defined.
I understand that you can't do it today. That's fine.
Yeah.
But so, given that that question, it follows up. Is this something we want to do? And I'm happy with the no. If you say we can only have one, that's fine.
So, Aloha, I asked the question about having a GAL point to a gash or an hash header. And then the FEI pointing to the actions, and they are coexisting. It's not two GALs, it's an FEI plus a GAL.
Yeah, that's the first, yeah.
And that I think that is a valid point we should shoot for. The two gash with two GALs, yeah,
well,
I'm not
sure.
So
there's another trick you can pull. So GAL means there's an ACH below the bottom of the stack. That's an invariant. That's so sort of thoroughly baked in, it's hard to change. But I would point out that there is 4 bits of version number there. So if you want to define a different version of the ACH with different parameters, then that is a possibility. And it will be fairly reasonable for the GAL to indicate that an ACH was at the bottom of the stack, and for the ACH handler to figure out what it is supposed to do when it sees version 1, when it always used to find version 0.
So version 0 and version 1 can't coexist in the same packet?
There's no technical reason why they couldn't. It's just that no one understands what to do with version 1 at the moment. So an old-fashioned GAL handler would presumably fall over and throw the packet away. A modern one would understand the difference between a version 0 and a version 1.
Okay.
We did build that flexibility in early on. There are also, by the way, 8-bit reserve bits in the ACH. I didn't intend to stop the conversation.
You can keep going.
No, but
I think we have 2 more minutes, though. Just
I just want to have an agreement on that we should look at it and see what.
You are quite correct to flag the issue and say that it's one of the things that we need to study.
There's nothing more that I want to do. If we get the situation where we can only have one ACH after the boss, fine, I can live with that. But then we go back to Terry's question. Can we also have metadata that belongs to the FAI?
FAI. And one way I was thinking is maybe that metadata is a new gash channel type, a new type.
The metadata could be a new channel type, but we don't currently have the ability to have more than one ACH at the end of the packet. So if we're going to change, we could have a different sort of ACH if that is what the consensus of the group was. And there is ways of doing it. We have 8 bits of versions, 4 bits of version and 8 bits of reserve type.
Yeah.
And then we have 16 bits of channel type. If the proposal is to chop that channel type in 2, we need to go and we need to make sure that that's not going to give us a different problem. So
you're saying that we're going to decrement the number of ACHs from 65,000 to 256?
that is a logical. Oh, we can't really do that, but that is a logical. Explain why we can't do it. That is a logical conclusion from that. The issue is that 23760 to 23767 are currently allocated as experimental, and so we would have to deal with that. So if you want to chop the existing, if you want to make a version 0 ACH, have a channel type that was, or the ACH type, you wanted to split that into two for two different functions, you can't do it in version 0 unless you deprecate the experimental range.
Do we know if anyone is actually using those bits?
Who knows? They're in the wild, right? I mean, how would you know?
And we need to assume that we can't touch them.
That's normally our policy in the MPLS world.
Well, actually, when we changed the I lost it. Okay, we changed the bits for which draft was it? But we did change it that actually could have affected the experimental bits, and we said no, we're not going to do that.
Right. So for information, we haven't allocated anything above hex 59. There's one, and there's a small number of there's quite a few spares below that. So if it wasn't for those experimental ones, you could chop it in two if that's what you wanted to do. But the safest thing to do is to create a new fundamental ACH type by revving it to version 1. Then you can do whatever you want.
So with 2 minutes past, can I take an action item to present a proposal on this? Next time, maybe we can review a new version for the ACH type, ACH header.
Well, if someone wants, I mean, for whom to do it? Because we need to know what the requirements are.
Oh, the requirements.
Yeah. If someone tells me what the requirements are, we can do something. But my
we can start with
part of the call is to. My duty at this part of the call is to point out what the world looks like at the moment and what the consequences of the change would be.
Well, that's my question. Do we want to do it? Actually, I could say, is there a requirement that we do it?
To do what? I think we need metadata plus an hash. I mean, that's a must. Now, how do you carry the metadata? Is it as another hash or I don't know? But you need metadata plus an hash, right?
Okay, so if you're talking about how to disambiguate between metadata that belongs to two different indicators in the label stack, that's a problem.
Yes.
And I'm not really ready to go to a decision on that next week, I think.
You can't. It's far too complicated.
Okay, well, I should say prepare a discussion in the MPLS working group to take a decision. No, I'm not ready to do that yet. No. But Tarek, if you want to write down a proposal, please do.
I was trying to take an action item, and I don't mind to start the at least documenting the requirements. If you you are wondering what is it that we want to.
So I mean, one of the questions is, will we ever find a case where a packet has a legacy ACH in it and anything and some other stuff in it? Because presumably whatever put the other stuff in would be aware that there was a legacy ACH present, and we just need to. It might be better to just restart the stack if you want to do anything like that.
Okay, let's kickstart this. I mean, I would volunteer, sure, at least first step. Okay, I will stop recording now if everybody is okay. I think we're wrapping up. Now I'm looking at Torla's screen. I think we are recording his moves. we were reading your email as well. It is on record, unfortunately. So
was that email route to his boss?
I wasn't sure, but he was recorded. That's the thing.